everyone. Welcome back. This is Professor Hall, and we are continuing our discussion on sentence variety. Wouldn't it be so bad to mix it up a little? Mix it up. Who are you, Betty Crocker? I love that little joke. Anyway, sentence variety indeed does mean mixing it up. And last time we talked about what it is and kind of how to do it. Today we're going to look at sentence variety in real life. So we have two paragraphs from articles and one from an internet message board. And we're going to talk about the variety that exists or does not exist, and then look at how those people could revise what they wrote. So what we learned and where we're going, I kind of just said this, but we just looked at different types of sentence structures a little while ago. Then we talked about sentence variety. And today we're looking at what's called authentic materials that use or fail to use good sentence variety. So we're putting these puzzle pieces together at last. And later after this, we're going to start looking at flaws in sentences, so mistakes that people make that lead to grammatical errors. Our plan for sentence structures, we talked about before, the master plan. Learning the types of sentences, moving toward comprehension, and now we're on step 3, authentic materials. Then you'll be practicing on your own, writing and getting feedback, and then revising kind of like we're going to revise today. So today is a little bit of like a demonstration of how to revise for sentence variety. So let's review what sentence variety is. Variety is another way of saying that things are not uniform or the same. Another word for variety is diversity. In writing, if all your sentences are uniformly simple and short, meaning that they're all the same, your papers will sound choppy and less mature. A lot of times things written for children have short, simple sentences. So if you write that way with just short, simple sentences, it's going to sound like you're writing for kids. Here's an example. Jessica and Darnell have dated for 3 years. They are in love. They plan to get married. Their parents want them to wait. They are going to elope instead. Now, I forgot to highlight that last, but you can kind of see they're almost all the same length. They're all simple sentences, and we have a lot of repetition. We have they 2, 3 times, and their parents. All of these start the same way. They have the subject and then the verb and then the rest of the predicate. So they're all simple sentences. If your sentences are uniformly or all the same, being long and complex, your papers might sound a little long-winded, and also your ideas are difficult to follow because you don't have any breaks for the reader to kind of take a breath and think. Jessica and Darnell have dated for 3 years and they are in love, so they plan to get married, but since their parents want them to wait, they are going to elope instead. This is not a run-on sentence, but it is a very long one. And on its own, it might not be that bad, but if you had sentence after sentence like this, it would be quite grueling to read. And you can kind of see the simple sentence, the conjunction, the other simple sentence, another conjunction. A simple sentence is also called an independent clause, if you remember. And then the dependent clause word, and then another independent clause. So a lot of ideas in that sentence. And honestly, if I got that much information in a little bit of time, I would be like, well, why do their parents want them to wait? Where are they going to elope to? Like, there's so many ideas that my brain just kind of doesn't know where to go. You want to really find that sweet spot. So not all short and choppy, not all long-winded. Have some short sentences, some simple sentences, and then some that are longer, like this one, which is compound complex, which we talked about before when we looked at sentence types. Jessica and Darnell have dated for 3 years. They are in love and they plan to get married, but their parents want them to wait. They are going to elope instead. So now I have a little bit of a mixture where it focuses on how long they dated, and then what's going on now, and then what they plan to do. Right? And that variety helps my reader to follow my thoughts, and the writing flows a little bit better. It makes the audience want to keep reading. That's always the goal. Even if you're writing a paper for your college professor. You don't want them to roll their eyes and give up and have to take a break. So, what is an authentic material? I keep saying this term. Authentic materials are print, video, and audio materials that we encounter in our daily lives. So, things like books, dialogue from a TV show, YouTube video, website, business documents, newspapers, magazines, songs, poems, all of those kind of things. It basically just means, unlike Jessica and Darnell, whose story I made up, it's not just in the classroom. It's something in real life. And the reason that I use authentic materials is that we don't live in the classroom. I can make stuff up, but it's not as practical. And if you're an adult and you're in my class, you want things to be practical. You want them to be relevant. Maybe you want them to kind of build on your experience, right? All three of those things. Sentences from a textbook are not practical and they're not relevant. You're not going to look at things that look like a textbook. When you look at some of these examples, you'll see, you'll be like, oh, they have like a simple and then a compound complex. You don't necessarily even need to break it down in that way, but I want you to kind of see what it looks like and, what it looks like in the real world. All right, so let's compare two paragraphs. I'm not going to read them yet. I just want you to see the highlighting here. So I've highlighted every other one. And just in terms of length, not even talking about the type of sentence structure, but just in terms of length, you can see this thing about Kawasaki disease over here has a medium sentence, a short, a medium, and then two longs, and then another medium. But the one over on the right-hand side, almost everything is exactly the same. Even look how it goes to here, and then the second is sometimes a little bit shorter, but essentially, they're all about the same length. So one has, it would appear, a little bit more variety than the other. So the first paragraph is from a medical website. Kawasaki disease starts with swelling in the walls of medium-sized arteries throughout the body. It primarily affects children. The inflammation tends to affect the coronary arteries, which supply the blood to the heart muscle. Kawasaki disease is sometimes called mucocutaneous lymph node syndrome because it also affects glands that swell during an infection, lymph nodes, skin, and the mucous membranes inside the mouth, nose, and throat. The clinical signs can include fever, rash, swelling of the hands and feet, irritation and redness of the whites of the eyes, swollen lymph glands in the neck, and irritation and inflammation of the mouth, lips, and throat, all of which can be frightening. However, the good news is that Kawasaki disease is usually treatable and most children recover from Kawasaki disease without serious problems. So I chose this, if you're watching this not in 2020, hopefully the coronavirus is long forgotten. But right now, this is a disease that children have been getting who have been affected by the coronavirus. So it's kind of relevant to what's going on in the world at the moment. And we do have some variety in terms of length, 13, 4, 15, 32, 44, and 21. Those are not lottery numbers. Those are the length, the number of words in each sentence. So we go from 4 to 44, right? Quite a bit of difference there. However, we have two pairs that begin the exact same way. So we have Kawasaki disease and Kawasaki disease. And, one pair. It primarily affects the inflammation tends. The clinical signs can include, however, the good news is. So we have one pair that, two sentences I think I meant to put. One pair that starts exactly the same way. And two longer sentences. I chose this topic also specifically because it is a little bit more complicated. And both of these sentences in a row can be, I think if you were reading this online like I did, the mucocutaneous, a word I did pronounce before I did this, is kind of a big word. So having this, if you notice, this is the independent clause, okay? Kawasaki disease is, so we have the subject here, then the predicate. Then we have our dependent clause word, because, and then a lot of things that follow that. So this is a complex sentence, but it's kind of a long one because it has so many things to list. So my question kind of looking at this was, if somebody it is a medical website, so the audience could be doctors, but a lot of people are just looking for information about this disease right now. And they might be kind of turned off and confused by sentences that are so long. So let's edit this for clarity and use some sentence variety. Kawasaki disease causes swelling in the walls of medium-sized arteries throughout the body. It primarily affects children. The inflammation tends to affect the coronary arteries, which supply blood to the heart muscle. Kawasaki disease is sometimes called mucocutaneous lymph node syndrome because it affects the lymph nodes. These are glands which swell during an infection. The disease also affects the skin and the mucous membranes inside the mouth, nose, and throat. Other clinical signs can include, and then we have the list again. However, the good news is that Kawasaki disease is usually treatable. Most children recover from Kawasaki disease without serious problems. So I separated the stuff just in the yellow. And why did I do that? Well, the first two things in the yellow explain the last sentence. So we still have the complex sentence, Kawasaki disease is, that's the independent clause, and because it affects the lymph nodes, that's the dependent. But then the dependent doesn't go on for so long with the whole list. These are glands which swell during an infection. This is an independent clause and a dependent, but it is also a tad bit shorter, right? And it explains the sentence just before it. I don't know why that keeps popping up. Sorry. This disease also affects the skin, etc. So now we have a simple sentence, and it is a little bit longer because of the list, but it's just the independent. There we go. And that helps us to understand that concept a tad bit better. Then taking that last sentence, which was compound, it had, let's flip back for a second. There we go. If you look here, and most children recover. So that was joined by that conjunction word. It's a compound sentence. Now I've split the compound up. However, the good news is that Kawasaki disease is usually treatable. Most children recover from Kawasaki disease without serious problems. And actually, it was compound complex before, and now it's not. I don't want to get into those terms again to fully explain, but at any rate, you can see the difference here. We had from 4 to 44 words, and we still have a variety in terms of length. Not quite exactly so much variety, but it's still a variety there. But now that long sentence in the middle is broken up, the information is easier to understand. And the last sentence is important information. If anxious parents are trying to read this, they might skim through and they might have missed that before. The important thing to know here is that most children recover from it. So you don't want to bury that in another sentence. All right, let's look at our second article. Now, this one was specifically written for parents, and it was entitled, What Parents Need to Know About Kawasaki Disease. News coverage of COVID-19 and its impact on our country have dominated the headlines. This is from the UK. Until recently, children were thought to be not significantly affected. This has changed after there were reports of critically ill children presenting with unusual symptoms. Within a few weeks, there were clusters of sick kids with Kawasaki disease. Kawasaki disease causes blood vessels to become inflamed or swollen throughout the body. We do not know what causes Kawasaki disease. More than 80% of children who get it are younger than 5 years of age. The hallmark of Kawasaki disease is a persistent fever over 101 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 4 days. This happens in addition to rash, redness of the eyes, lips, and tongue, swelling and redness to hands, feet, and neck swelling. So in terms of length, we don't have too much variety, but I think we're not going to talk until a little bit about audience. If you're not my class, you can skip ahead to that video anytime you like. It's under audience, purpose, and tone. But the audience here is different, right? There's not medical professionals. So we're not getting some of those terms like mucocutaneous that we had before. And that's why we have shorter sentences, because it's meant to be skimmed by parents to understand what's going on. I don't think the kids are getting actual Kawasaki. I could be wrong. I think it's a disease that looks like Kawasaki, but they're not quite sure at the moment that I'm recording this. So I'm not sure how accurate the article is. I just want to kind of say that. But at any rate, the paragraph has different ways of beginning each sentence. It doesn't just start with subject, verb, like we saw before. So we have some introductory phrases: until recently, within a few weeks. For example, more than 80% of children who get it are younger than 5 years of age. So there's a little bit of difference here. We do have this and this twice. But overall, because there's no variety, it is a little bit choppy. And it is a little bit monotonous to read. So what can we do about it? Well, we're not going to edit for clarity this time. What can we do instead? Sentence variety for flow. News coverage of COVID-19 and its impact on our country have dominated the headlines. Until recently, children were thought not to be significantly affected by COVID-19, but this has changed after there were reports of critically ill children presenting with unusual symptoms. Within a few weeks, there were clusters of sick kids with something resembling Kawasaki disease, a rare condition which causes blood vessels to become inflamed or swollen throughout the body. We do not know what causes it. More than 80% of children who get it are 5 years of age or younger. The hallmark of Kawasaki disease is a persistent high fever for at least 4 days and a rash with redness to the eyes, lips, and tongue. There can also be swelling and redness to the hands, feet, and neck swelling. So now in terms of length, we range from 13 to 30 words. And, I didn't add that many words, but I just combined some of the sentences. And the reason that I did that was to help connect ideas. I think here there's a little bit of a better flow. Now, you can totally disagree with me. The first one definitely was easy to understand, but I don't know if the idea is quite connected enough. But it was written in a shorter, choppier way because they wanted parents to understand very clearly what was going on. So that was their purpose. I've revised it here just like, hey, if we're reading about this again, let's make it flow a little bit better. So that's another way that sentence variety can be used. The first way is for clarity, and the second is for flow, just kind of like that short thing we read from Gary Provost last time. You're trying to create music with your words, and you want them to sound pleasant, and you want it to be fun and easy to read. So here's one last example. This is from an internet message board, not about Kawasaki. You tell me, do you think someone my age, 20, is the same as a 40-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-something-year-old? I would personally say 17 to 22 is an area that has a lot in common. Obviously, it would seem like the older you get, the more mature you are. There are some 17-year-olds who are in attendance at college with legal adults. Other people like me are 20 and still haven't gone to college. 20 to 22 isn't technically being a teenager. It is similar in terms of development. Some of us still look like children. I am 20, but people tell me that I look 14 to 16 years old. Now, I think this is from Quora, where you ask questions and then have people answer you. But you can see that there's some grammar issues here, but we're not going to talk about those today. I just want to look at the sentence variety. Oh, I look even younger without makeup. I forgot that sentence was there. Sorry, guys. So I've highlighted every other sentence. Here's my question, kind of to think about. Are the ideas expressed here too complicated to understand? I would say not really. She's asking a question about really whether people who are 20s are adults like 40-year-olds or are they more like teenagers, right? And we don't have long, complicated sentences, so that's not really what's going on here. Are the sentences mostly shorter and choppier? Yeah, they look longer because I've moved them over and kind of made them smaller for our questions here, but they're almost all about the same length. There's not too much. You can even see the pattern, right? Yellow for 3 lines, white for 2, yellow for 2, white for 2, yellow for 2, and then it's 1. White for 1, yellow for 1, white for 1, yellow for 1, and kind of a half, and then white for another one, right? So the idea is, do they connect? I think that you can understand what she's trying to ask, but I don't know if the ideas fully connect. So this kind of needs to be revised for both clarity and flow. And the sentence structure that we see the most is really the simple sentence, right? There aren't a lot of conjunction words. We have one that I'm looking at, and one but. So there's a compound and there's a complex, but for the most part, it's simple sentences. So how can we improve it? Well, we can improve it quite a bit. You tell me, do you think someone of my age is the same as a 40-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-something-year-old? I would personally say 17 to 22 is an area that has a lot in common. Obviously, it would seem like the older you get, the more mature you are, but that is not always the case. For example, there are some 17-year-olds who are in attendance of a college with legal adults, while other people like me are 20 and still haven't gone to college. 20 to 22 isn't technically being a teenager, but it is similar in terms of development. Some of us still look like children. For example, I am 20. But people tell me I look 14 to 16 years old, and I look even younger without makeup. So now, the green are my additions. Those are the only things that I added, and I didn't fix the grammar problem that is above. But you have, combining here, we have a but, we have an introduction, now used for example twice, which I shouldn't have done, but that's okay. There's the conjunction, so we turned the 2 simple sentences here into a compound sentence. Here we did the same thing with a but. Here I turned it into a dependent clause. So we have our independent who are still in attendance. Dependent clause with legal adults, while is another dependent clause, and still haven't gone to college. Here, obviously, it would seem like the more mature you are, but that's not always the case. So we have simple sentence, conjunction, simple sentence. Even if you don't remember or you don't want to identify all the types of sentence structures here, hopefully you can kind of see how this works. That's the important thing. Comprehension means that you're understanding the concept of sentence variety. Here, we still have short sentences. Some of us still like children. You tell me. Those I didn't change because that's part of her voice, right? It's those short sentences. You tell me kind of brings us into it. Some of us still look like children is an interesting idea because she was kind of talking about like brain development sort of stuff. So the other thing I want to say here is, an authentic material will look a little bit different from something you will write in school because your audience is different. So I'm going to have now, if this was a more formal essay, and show you kind of what that would look like with some sentence variety. There's much debate over whether someone 20 years of age is an adult. You notice we don't have the number 20, right? We have the word. Some researchers believe that the ages of 17 through 22 have much in common, which indicates that the line between being a teenager and being an adult is not as clear as previously thought. Obviously, it would seem like the older you get, the more mature you are, but that's not always the case. In fact, while some younger teenagers of 16 or 17 may attend college courses with legal adults, Others put off college until their brains develop further, until they have the maturity to take classes, or until their life circumstances allow them to go. Recent studies in neuroscience reveal, so then we have the personal example. But you can kind of see we're introducing that this is not completely her idea. There's a debate over it. Some research believe, and recent studies show. And the tone is totally different until we get to the example of herself. It's all what's called third person. But even though I've completely rewritten it, the ideas are basically the same. I just wanted to sort of show this is the difference between what an essay looks like and what something in the real world looks like. You're not going to have formal things every time, but that doesn't mean that you can't still use sentence variety. You can use sentence variety in a social media post. If you're doing something like Instagram, you can have sentence variety in there and make your writing more interesting to match your photo, right? And if you are doing an email to your boss, you don't want just short, choppy sentences, and you don't want super long, complex sentences, because then your boss won't necessarily want to read that. So this can be used in a variety of, sentence variety can be used in a variety of different places. In essays like this, but also in authentic materials like we've looked at. So let's review. Mix it up. I love it. Sentence variety means changing the structures and lengths of sentences. Sometimes we might have to shorten sentences to make things more clear. Other times we might have to turn simple sentences into compound complex sentences to help connect ideas. And still other times we might have to vary the openings of sentences or add description or information. Now that we've examined sentences and how sentences are put together in a variety of ways, we're ready to look at sentence flaws. Before we do that in my actual course, you have some pages in your book that also have to do with sentence variety and sentence structures. And there's a really good handout from the OWL at Purdue, if you're not in my class, that is the online writing lab at Purdue. If you go to them and you look up sentence variety, they have a number of examples of ways that you can have better sentence variety for clarity, for flow, and to connect your ideas. So I highly recommend that resource. It's great and anybody can take a look at it. And that is it for sentence structures and variety. And I will see you guys next time when we talk about fragments, our first grammar error. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.